So I can't believe this. This actually blew my mind, but I agreed with Tucker Carlson for once. This guy, I know you guys don't know me that well, but Tucker Carlson is in my top 3 of people that I just cannot. I cannot. Tucker Carlson is one of them. It's Tucker Carlson and Mitch McConnell. I cannot. And actually, it used to be Trump, who I used to just be like, what the hell with this guy? But now it's actually Meghan McCain. So anyway, I'm sure you can understand. I want to show you this clip. First of all, though, if you're new, please subscribe. Just hit this box here and subscribe to my channel. I'd really appreciate it. And if you have any questions or comments, then you can tweet me at Kim Iverson Show. You can also email me. Just go to my website, KimIverson.com. And again, I do appreciate your support. If you are a patron on Patreon, I absolutely appreciate that, because every little bit helps right now, as I'm new show, just launched about 6-7 weeks ago, and trying to keep this, trying to get this thing going. So I appreciate that. Okay, let me show you this clip from Tucker Carlson. Blows my mind. Here it is.
Well, recently, a number of high-profile Democrats have been talking up an economic system called socialism. In Venezuela, they've had socialism for 20 years. The results? Not good. Some of the worst income inequality in the world. 90% of the country lives in poverty, while the ruling class vacations in Switzerland. Quite a spread. The average Venezuelan has lost almost 25 pounds from starvation. In a word, a disaster. But it could get even worse for Venezuelans and for us here in the United States. The U.S. has just imposed new sanctions on Venezuela. Some lawmakers are now cheering on the idea of regime change there. Sound familiar? Recently, one Republican senator tweeted out 2 photographs of former Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi. The first showed Gaddafi smiling. The second showed him covered in dirt and blood shortly before being tortured, sodomized, and killed. The point was clear. Bad dictators will be overthrown by the United States. Maduro should watch out. What the tweet did not acknowledge is what happened to Libya after Hillary Clinton intervened and Gaddafi was toppled from power. Is Libya a thriving democracy now? No, it's not. It is still a war-torn hellhole. Worse, even. Slave markets thrive in its major cities. Gaddafi once protected Europe from mass migration. Now, Libya is the main departure point for huge numbers of migrants coming into Europe illegally. The lesson here is pretty obvious. Sometimes even horrible dictators are preferable to the chaos that replaces them. Our leaders have not learned that. How will attacking Venezuela improve this country? Will it make America safer, more prosperous? No, it won't. That's not even the point, though. The idea that American foreign policy should somehow help America has become a quaint historical relic, something you don't see anymore, like phone booths or compelling network television. It's just gone. A Brookings Institution report predicts that a Venezuela crisis could create 8 million refugees. That's even more than the number created by the Syrian civil war. It's a disaster. 2 reckless Florida congressmen have proposed granting Venezuelans temporary protected status in the U.S. In other words, even if they came here illegally, they could stay forever. Temporary status like this never ends. Nicaragua still has temporary status, so it can recover from a hurricane that hit that country more than 20 years ago. If Venezuela gets this benefit, it will be around when your grandchildren are old, guaranteed. And if we send troops there, they will never leave either. Just like American troops have never left Syria or Iraq or Afghanistan or Korea, for that matter. Permanent obligations to solve temporary problems. That's our foreign policy in a nutshell. In Washington, nobody learns anything.
Wow. I was not expecting that. I really was not. But, even though he begins, of course, demonizing socialism, because that's what Fox News has to do, which socialism had absolutely nothing to do with the collapse of Venezuela at all. Socialism does not collapse economies. The lack of democracy collapses nations, and also being heavily sanctioned collapses nations. When you become broke because you can't, in the case of Venezuela, they were unable to really market their oil. They were unable to actually profit from it. So because of that, then they were, they were shut out. It's kind of similar to put it in really layman's terms. I mean, we see this all the time happening, on Twitter, like the outrage when people say, okay, we're going to boycott this business. We're boycotting that business. and you just wait for that business to tank, and then they go out of business because you've decided to boycott them. I mean, you've decided collectively that they're morally wrong or that they've done something that you don't like, and so you're boycotting them. You're not allowing them to make any money, and that's the end of it. And that's what we do to nations around the world when we sanction them. And that's what Tucker Carlson is talking about. I cannot believe, I mean, guys, so I can't believe I'm actually talking about Tucker Carlson and saying, well, the guy's onto something. But he is. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. He's saying, look, that the lawmakers are looking to put more sanctions on Venezuela. Those sanctions, what they do is if the people become so desperate in poverty, so if you bankrupt the country, if you just completely bury them and the people are now starving and they can't get the medical care they need and everybody's in dire straits, that's how you incite riots. That's how you get people to, that's how you get a lot of violence. You get uprisings. That's how leaders got their heads cut off. So that's what we were trying to do with Venezuela and continuing to do so with the continued sanctions, heavier sanctions. We're trying to make them chaotic so that the people rise up and just overthrow the government themselves rather than us having to use military intervention. So there's multiple ways you can go about getting a nation to overturn. One way is to just drive them to the brink of just absolute desperation. So Tucker's saying that, I mean, that's absolutely true. And we have not learned when he said that foreign policy should benefit Americans. And yet that seems to be an ancient relic like phone books and rotary telephones, right? And it really is. I mean, the idea that our foreign policy should be about benefiting Americans. And this is one thing, when people talk about, I get this criticism about Tulsi Gabbard a lot. They say, oh, but Tulsi, she says she's a dove, but she's really a hawk. And I'm like, no, you don't want a complete dove, right? You don't want somebody who's not going to protect our nation. You want somebody who says, there's a threat. We need to deal with that threat. And that's that. But you also don't want somebody who's going to be affecting these regime changes around the world that have no benefit whatsoever to the American people. That it's just, it's all about the money. It's all about the oil. It's all about, that's what it's about. I shouldn't say that there's no benefit to the American people because the reality is that if the petrodollar crashes, then that is horrible for our economy. So I do have to paraphrase that if I'm going to be totally honest. And then, Tucker Carlson goes on and he says in the beginning, really, that sometimes what people need to realize is that, yeah, there might be horrible dictators out there, but they're preferable to what follows them. I mean, look at what happened to Libya. Look at what's happened to Libya. There is an open slave trade market going on. You cannot say that us overturning Gaddafi because of human rights abuses has now liberated these people, and now they're free from this brutal dictator that we were so great to go in Captain America style and overturn. That these people are suffering. They are worse off. We've got a catastrophe in Libya. And it's going to be like that everywhere else. In Syria, they're not better off there. In Venezuela, they're certainly not better off since we've intervened with sanctions. Those people are starving. We have starved them to death, not their government, not socialism. We did it. It had nothing to do with their economic system. Socialism and capitalism are just forms of economies. And then you've got your political forms. You've got dictatorships and monarchies and democracies and republics, and you've got all these various things. And socialism has nothing to do with the collapse of Venezuela. Socialism was they were implementing that to try to save the people because of the sanctions. They were trying to make sure that people didn't starve. I mean, it's one of those things where you have to, you need to, well, anyway, let's just leave it at that. There's just so much to say. We could go on and on and on and on about this. I just cannot believe that I actually agreed with Tucker Carlson. I don't know what is he trying to do here. I mean, is he trying to lose his job? And the thing that's bad about this is, it's great that we see people on both sides of the spectrum saying, hey, we want to end this. This is not working. This is a losing strategy for everybody involved. But, and it has turned into There's warmongers in the Democratic Party and warmongers in the Republican Party, and there are people who are who are doves on both sides of the party, in the Republican Party and in the Democratic Party. And of course, we want a foreign policy that protects our nation. But we also need to have a foreign policy that doesn't destroy other nations. Unless there's a direct threat to us. It's very much like, I am anti-murder. Okay, I don't want to murder anybody. I don't want to have to shoot anybody. I'm against that. I'm sure you're against it too, unless you're, a real crazy person or a serial killer. You're against killing people. But if somebody's going to come to my home and threaten me or threaten my loved ones, then in that moment, I might have no choice. That's the foreign policy we should have as a nation as well. It should be, look, if we get to a situation where we don't have a choice, then that's what we must do. And obviously, there are some cases where it is a moral obligation for the nation. When we see absolute horrific atrocities happening, then we absolutely should get involved. But that's not what's happening with all of these wars. That's not what's happening. So, I don't know. Tucker Carlson, this one's interesting to me. And I do want to also end with for everybody to know, the defense lobby spends almost equal amounts of money on Republicans and Democrats. And you should know that the money that is spent, it's almost equal. At times it's been more with the Democrats. At times it's been more with Republicans. But they spend pretty equally on both sides of the aisle because they want both sides advocating for war. Okay, Bernie Sanders, he did talk about reparations in his town hall, and I do want to address that. We're going to talk about, are reparations a good idea, and what even are reparations? That is coming up.